Hello, this is Ken Ferry with this week's Boots in the Field report. Hope everyone enjoyed their holidays. It's that time of giving, and it looks like the markets are doing their part. I assume everyone is taking advantage of this gift in one way or another. Do not let them expire like some of the gift cards I have from past Christmases. Today's discussion is going to deal with picking the right nitrogen rate. Like choosing the right hybrid, N rates have the potential to make big differences on the bottom line in both yield and the ROI. There's a simple way. Do what you've done the last 5 years. It seems to work. And there's something to be said about not fixing something that's not broke. Some of the questions we're dealing with here at the office is with guys who are wanting to lower their N rate. If we can do this without giving up little or no yield, we'll improve the ROI and we'll be better for the environment. Growers are looking at nitrogen additives to either protect or improve nitrogen efficiency, allowing them to apply less nitrogen and maintain yield. Others are looking at the N rate calculator, especially if you're submitting nutrient plans for the government payments. Some growers use the same N rate on all farms, no matter the yield goal or the planted population. I wish it were this easy. Through tissue testing and stalk testing and testing of the root systems in our hydroponic work, we know that a corn plant's going to pick up somewhere between 1.4 and 1.6 pounds of N per bushel. We know from the grain samples that we've sent off from our hand harvest work that we remove between 0.6, 0.7 pounds per bushel. With this info, why is an N rate calculation simple? Why is it complicated? Well, the challenge comes back in calculating what amount of this nitrogen will be supplied by the soil, which could be from 30 to 70% of what you need could come through mineralization. Add to that the factor of nitrogen loss and microbial tie-up or immobilization. Add to that plant densities that we're feeding out there and hybrid response. When does the plant need it? To dial in the right nitrogen rate, you must implement a 4R concept. The right source, the right rate, the right time, the right place, for each yield zone for each hybrid. Let me take you through some preliminary plot data we are working on for the winter meetings. In this plot, we are matching up the 4Rs with hybrids and populations and yield zones. This plot is in corn on corn. Part of it was fall plowed. Fall plowing eliminates most of the carbon penalty issues and a lot of the early allelopathic issues in corn on corn. The rest of the plot was spring chiseled, burying tons of carbon in the top 6 inches of soil just weeks before planting. This scenario creates one of the toughest for carbon penalty and allelopathic issues. We then applied 67 pounds of dry nitrogen in the dry broadcast application, and we incorporated it with the Turbomax. We planted a D hybrid at 22,000 and 36,000. A D hybrid gets a lot of its yield from kernel depth in the last 30 days of grain fill. D hybrids can handle a rough start and stress during the season better than other hybrids, but they must have a strong finish to achieve high yields. Fall plowed corn on corn is a lot easier start than spring chiseled, but this is not that important to a D hybrid. It doesn't care about its early start, it cares about its finish. In the first block, along with the 67 pounds of nitrogen that went on in our dry program, we added 30 pounds of N in a weed and feed application, broadcast of course, as well as 9 pounds with the FurrowJet and 30 pounds in a 2x2 with the planter. So we have a total of 136 pounds going on. Now all these techniques are designed to improve early growing conditions, but not enough total N in corn on corn to keep this hybrid happy at the back end. The D hybrid planted at 22,000 yielded 175 bushel. Planted at 36,000, it yielded 169 bushel. The low population out-yielded the high population by about 6 bushel. This would indicate that there's not enough either water or nitrogen in August to support 36,000. The next block, we upped the weed and feed to 60 pounds and the planter 2x2 application to 60 pounds. So now bringing our total to 196 pounds. It is still all targeted for early growth in the early part of the growing season. The 22,000 strip bumped yield from 175 to 215 bushel, which would indicate nitrogen was the limiting factor, not population. By increasing the N rate 60 pounds, we bumped yields 40 bushel. The 36,000 strip only yielded 170 with the extra N. Here you can see how plant density affects your nitrogen rate. The same rate of N at 22,000 out-yielded 36,000 by 45 bushel. When we pushed that population without the N there, we took a beating. So N rates and population are tied together. When we push population, we need more nitrogen to maintain yield. If it doesn't come from the soil, you're going to need to supply it. In the next block, along with the dry fertilizer and the starter N, we lowered the broadcast weed and feed rate to 30 pounds, and we lowered the planter 2x2 rate to 30 pounds, but we added 120 pounds in the sidedress application, bringing our total N rate now to 256 pounds. The 22,000 strip did not increase yield, indicating population is most likely stopping yield now. The 36,000 population strip went from 170 to 217. That's a 47 bushel increase from that 60 pound rate of N. This would tell us that N was a limiting factor for this D hybrid when it was planted at 36,000. The next block, we kept the N rate the same at 256 pounds, but we applied it different. This block was spring chiseled corn on corn. So now we have a lot of front end stress to deal with. We applied our 67 pounds in the dry in the spring broadcast, but we pulled out the weed and feed and all the planter in as well. We pushed the sidedress rate to 180 pounds. In essence, we're backloading this for the D hybrid. In this strip, 36,000 bumped up from 217 bushel to 247 bushel. That's a 30 bushel gain for the same pounds of N, only changing one of the 4 R's, timing. In the second hybrid, which is rated an L1, L2, which is a hybrid that flexes in length or number of kernels per row. L1 hybrids flex before pollination, so you just end up with a short cob, where L2 hybrids flex after pollination, and you end up with aborted tip kernels. For L1, L2 hybrids, you need to keep them happy from V6 through early dose stage. This hybrid was laid out in the same treatments as the previous one. At 136 pound rate of N, 22,000 yielded 189 bushel. 36,000 yielded 184 bushel. And again, when I talk about 22 and 36, these are planted populations. The lower population out yielded the higher population. we can bet nitrogen's a limiting factor, not enough to feed all those plants. When we bump the N rate to 196, the 22,000 stalled out at 189, indicating population may now be the limiting factor. The 36,000 jumped from 184 bushel to 230 bushel, indicating nitrogen was the limiting factor. 36,000 was now yielding 42 bushel better than 22,000, and we'd expect it. The increase of 60 pounds of N for the 36,000 amounted to 46 bushel, but it didn't change the 22,000. Once again, showing us that we need to tie our N rates to plant density. In the next plot, we moved our total N rate to 256 pounds. Again, along with 67 in the dry, 9 in the starter, 30 in the weed and feed, 60 in the 2x2, we added 90 pounds to the side dress. So this would be what we call the full meal deal to keep a plant happy from V6 through dose stage. Early in and then some in at the back end. That 22,000 strip did bump up to 206 bushel, but the 36,000 jumped up to 259 bushel. That tells us nitrogen was still the limiting factor, and we bumped another 29 bushel with an additional 60 pounds of N. In the chisel strip, where we took out the weed and feed, we took out the planter N, we just had our dry application, and we had the 180 pound side dress. In this situation with the L1, L2 hybrid, both the 22 and the 36,000 dropped 6 bushel, indicating some earlier N is needed in those L1, L2s. Think of that. Raising your N rate from 136 pounds to 256 pounds, increased 22,000 plant population by 17 bushel, increased 36,000 by 75 bushel. Boys, population makes a difference. Hybrid type makes a difference. Timing makes a difference. And the right rate makes a difference. In this plot, the top economic yield looks to be around 256 pounds to produce 259 bushel corn. But if I plug that into the N calculator, using 37 cent N and 350 corn, the MRTN is 193 pounds for corn on corn. But when we went from 196 pounds to 256 pounds, the yield jumped 30 bushel. No matter how bad your marketing skills are, that is enough corn to buy 250 to 300 pounds of nitrogen. When we apply what we know about this year and the soil this plot is in, some of this can be sorted out. 2020 was what we'd call a nitrogen-friendly year based on nitrate test. Little N was lost. So why such a strong response to nitrogen? Well, it starts with the IS&T values in this plot. IS&T is a test developed by the University of Illinois to help predict mineralization. Most of our customers' IS&T levels are in the top 2 feet or in the range of 300 to 400 part per million. Based on our testing, anything higher than 350 part per million is considered nitrogen friendly. Anything below 350, we call that nitrogen thirsty. The average IS&T for this plot was 260 parts per million, meaning we knew this plot was going to be nitrogen thirsty. By our past testing, 180 bushel yield goal on 22,000 plant population here would take about 200 pounds of N, while the 240 bushel yield goal at 36,000 population is going to take about 290 pounds of N. If this plot had been on a soil with 450 part per million IS&T, planted at 36,000, it would have stopped responding to N at about 160 pounds. Huge swing. IS&T swings up and down across the field. Usually the lower ground has higher numbers, the higher ground has lower numbers. Having a 100-pound variation across the field is actually common. You now know the right rate. Then take into account your hybrid preference as to when it needs the nitrogen. Early, mid, late. Hybrid preference helps you to pick the right time and placement. Placement then sets up the right source. We don't apply 180 pounds of anhydrous in a 2x2 band on the planter. Find the source that fits the application, timing, and placement. You've now implemented a 4R approach to your nitrogen program. The last thing to do is to monitor the weather. Be ready to handle nitrogen losses. Be ready to call audibles on the line, making changes to offset the risk of N loss. Main takeaway, a lot goes into a good nitrogen program. We need to get it right. Being short on N will clip your yields more than any other nutrient. Before you make big changes to your N rate, do your homework. I know that's a lot to chew through. We'll go over these plots in detail in the winter meetings. Dates have been set for our annual basic and advanced basic meetings, which will be held virtually this year in 4 meetings across 2 weeks. These meetings are to set up the foundation in agronomy. They are targeted to our new customers, prospect customers, and existing customers who just want a review, agronomy review. Let Katie or your retailer know if you're interested so we can send you an access code for that meeting. Katie will be sending out email reminders as well. The dates for our virtual winter meetings have been set, and we'll be sending out the invites for that as well. To stay up to date, check out our website at croptechinc.com and subscribe to our podcast, Boots in the Field Report. Keep her safe, keep her moving.